All right, people, Stacks by the Numbers, welcome back. Wanted to do a quick update for the technicals, really, on the charts of three major indices and just a handful of stocks we were looking at recently, just to show you a couple of things I'm keeping an eye on. So, obviously, we were green today to close out the week. This is our resistance, as you see, going back from the highs there mid-February, cutting down across, and you can see that we've been bouncing around, but technically the S&P is back above that resistance level, which means we could potentially go to maybe here, mid-consolidated range, looking like about 56, 57. So you might have a clean run up for about 100 plus points, potentially even 150. And obviously, you know, if it continues up, we can go back and retrace to 6,000 plus. But I have a feeling that, see this big volatile drop here, and then we reclaimed most of it, but not all of it. And then we made a higher low, and then you can see we made a higher high, right? So what I think, in my opinion, is we're potentially seeing the forming of this kind of like upward stepping channel. And then we may potentially break and drop to the lower support levels again. So, in my opinion, I don't think you can take that volatility off the table yet. And I know, again, that the technicals are showing, bullish cross on the resistance, so we can run up a little bit, maybe Monday, Tuesday, understandable. I'm talking, of course, as a longer term, investment view. I think, in my opinion, that while the markets could rebound here over the next couple of days, even couple of weeks, I do think that over the next 1 to 2 months, I do think that we channel and then we potentially break back down. So just something to keep in mind. Again, I could be wrong, and honestly, I hope I am wrong, because we know that everyone's bigly positioned in the markets now because they've been doing so well, and when they really chunk down, everyone, for the most part, sees their account value drop. So for all of you, of course, I hope that I'm wrong and we just run back up and everything works out great, right? But in reality, we were talking about this even before Trump got elected, even going into elections. I was looking back, right, last summer, September, October, going into November, and I was saying that with the tariffs and the fact that we ran so much under Biden when we really shouldn't have, I said it was almost inevitable that we would see a market sell-off. Even if we consolidated for a year, we would drop down and we would hang out before potentially bucking up and really jumping to even higher highs, right? So just something to keep in mind, but I wanted to show the cross on the resistance level there. Nasdaq, essentially same thing, right? Going back from those highs. Nasdaq now above that resistance trend line, so we can have a nice run up. Easily probably about 500 points here. As you see, you have a fib level slightly below 20K. So, we might just slowly tick up there, and then that might be the first level of resistance that we run into. We'll see what happens next week. The Dow, you can see here, the Dow, if we go back from those same highs in February, that's like this line, and you can see we're technically not above that resistance line as we are compared to the S&P and the Nasdaq. But if we look at from when we began the big volatile chunk down, you can see if you draw the line across those tops, technically the Dow is above that shorter term resistance level. Right? So the Dow, if the S&P and the Nasdaq climb up, the Dow might just follow suit, and you might see a run up here to this trend line, potentially 40,960, and maybe even run up and test this resistance level, which again, these two just got above. So it might just run straight up to about 41,200. So a couple of levels for you to keep in mind here. Recently rejected off of this fib, it looks like 40,376 roughly. So you can see we popped up, retraced to the fib, and then dropped back below the trend line. And then now we've gone up and climbed back above the trend line. So this fib level is one to watch, right? And keep an eye on that retest, that previous high, 40,376.12. And just keep an eye on the double top. Okay. Nope. We're going to SMCI, everyone's favorite stock. So here's our 1 year chart. I was talking about the potential retracement back to this trend line here of about 37. Stock has been slowly climbing up, got back above the 20-day moving average. This is its resistance level here as well that we were looking at. And you can see, look, we came almost straight to that apex, and then we started to break up. As expected, we were looking for about 37. Stock hit 36.74. So that's the line we have to keep an eye on here, the low 37s, and we'll see if we pop up and break back into the low to mid 40s potentially going into next week. We'll keep an eye on that. SOUN, Soundhound. you can see essentially the same thing I was saying in the Discord. Again, Discord free for you guys to join. Just request a fresh link in the comments. I keep an expired link to keep the bots out. And we were talking about this downward channel here, and I mentioned that you have to keep an eye on these trend lines here to see if we break and we could potentially drop to the high fives, or if we're going to climb up, test resistance, and break out and go to this trend line, which would be about $10. And you can see that we bounced perfectly off the trend lines, climbed up, got above resistance, and then gapped up, and we've been up and up since. Stock today, $9.97. I said it could hit 10. Bada bing, bada boom. Just too damn good, baby. Embot looking beautiful from our last updates. Of course, we caught this premature breakout here of the symmetrical triangle that we were speaking about. I predicted, in my opinion, it looked pretty bullish. It was going to make its way up to about 255. You can see it did that perfectly. Hung out there for a while. We had the drop off, and then we climbed back up. And you can see today, high of 278, and we were looking at a potential jump up to this trend line here, which I believe is about, yeah, it's showing $3. I thought it was like 280. Hold on. We're not in sync here. There we go. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it readjusted, but yeah, it was about 284, 285. I was saying, in my opinion, top line resistance, which was probably going to be hit now that we had this breakout. And again, yeah, about 285, and you can see stock today, 278, flattened out, staying up there. So in my opinion, you know, we're probably going to get to that spot. Should happen Monday, Tuesday, but again, 285. Stock ran up to 278. Phenomenal call. Let's look at like HIMS real quick. HIMS again, you can see the trend that's been taking place, right? These stocks dropped down like mid-February. We went into this kind of bearish channel with everything, and now if you draw out your resistance trend lines, you can see that a lot of stocks are now past these resistance levels. And HIMS, we got above here, looks like we jumped right around to this fib, and then we dropped down, retested this support level, and now again we ran back up to this fib of about 28 3/4, and now we flattened out. But the stock technically is above resistance, is above the 20-day moving average. So in my opinion, it really should run back up to about here, which would be about $40 a share. But I mentioned that resistance level, and we're above it, so figured I'd mention it real quick. Did a video on Bitcoin recently. Let's back this up. Yep, same thing. I mentioned this resistance level here. I mentioned the fact that we could potentially channel down and come down to this apex over here going into mid-May if we don't prematurely break out. And you can see markets have been going up. Bitcoin's been going up. We popped up above resistance, and then you can see the big candles, big green candles popping up and out because we broke above a key technical. And now we're probably on our way back here, which again, I speculated would happen if and when the breakout above the resistance level took place. And you can see you're looking at roughly $100,800, in my opinion, should be the next stop for Bitcoin. But also there was a couple of other stocks that we spoke about recently. HII, that absolutely nobody was interested in, which in my opinion is extremely silly. Again, this is a domestic company that does shipbuilding, right? That's why I jumped on and I did the video about it, and the video came out April 11th, so it was 2 weeks ago. And again, it was right here as it gapped up. That's when I did it, right? About 215, 220, and you can see that we flattened out. Looks like it formed a tight little ascending triangle, and now broke up today, 1.8%, already up to 226, and nothing has really happened yet. No big announcements, right? That's why I was saying this stock can easily retrace back up here towards these lows of the high 230s, potentially 240. And of course, you can easily run it back up here to this trend line about 260. And of course, if we do happen to actually get orders and contracts in for the shipbuilding, as President Trump has laid out, I do think it'll explode back up here to the high 290 trend line level and eventually make new highs of 300 plus. I believe I personally put a conservative price target of about $350 a share on that one. We looked at Enovix a few weeks ago, just one or two more, bear with me. We looked at Enovix a while back, April 4th. And we were, I believe I cited the break of this symmetrical triangle, it looks like, and I mentioned that we could potentially pull back here to the bottom of this channel here, which looked like just about $5 a share. And you can see that this is where markets kind of bottomed out and we began to flatten out and gain some momentum, right? So the stock ended up hitting a low of 527, it looks like here, almost getting exactly to that trend line and then flattening out. And now you can see we've slowly been climbing up. The stock gets back above the 20-day moving average. Boom, we get some little pops. Stock green today, 691 here after hours. Got above this fib of 643. So we might retrace back up into the 8s and the 9s here on something like Enovix. But yeah, just the fact that a lot of these stocks came back above their resistance trend lines that we looked at recently. You know, I just thought I'd give everyone an update. Look at SoFi, talking about just absolutely beautiful, absolutely perfect. The stock comes down. Again, we were in this downward channel. I was expecting a drop, I believe, down to about 10 if we were looking at this trend line. And you can see we flash crashed even lower. Of course, markets were really chunking down. But we were talking about the easy retracement back to the 20-day moving average, saying you can easily play this stock over the next week or two back to 11, right? 10 to 11, quick 10%, even if you got in early. And of course, now you can see that if we go back to end of January, middle of February, we draw out our resistance trend line. You can see, what do you know? The stock today jumps up to 1305, closes at 1288, 1291 after hours, and essentially stopped right at that resistance trend line, and again, ran up to 13. So even something like this, as we know, we make our watch list, we look at a stock that has done well. When it does sell off and drop down to a fair or undervalued price, we begin to accumulate shares, build a position, catch the rebound, bada bing, bada boom, we're in, we're out, right? So you could have easily stepped in on something like SoFi, 9 and change, low 10s, boom, you just made 25, 30% real quick, and it took about 2 weeks and change. Absolutely beautiful. And of course, if you keep an eye on your technicals and you're able to watch it like a hawk, if we do break up and out, then you can see that we could potentially run back up here, so you might be able to hold that baby up till 17. So that's what I mean. The returns that you could make are huge and they're massive. And, you know, I hate to be too cocky and too conceited, but again, my success rate has been hovering around 80 to 90%, even in the short-term calls now, let alone forget about the long-term investment calls, which my success has been even better, right? So, again, I'm not being cocky. Am I the best out there? Of course, probably not. You know, I'm sure there's people out there who are outperforming me, but at the end of the day, again, success rate sitting between like 80 and 90%. So whatever you do with this information is entirely your own prerogative. Looked at SoFi. We looked at HIMS. SMCI. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, I just wanted to show again all those resistance levels, especially on the major indices, getting above those resistance levels, and of course just show you how it, you know, works out and could show you the potential moves coming if you see a break above a resistance trend line or even a break below a support trend line. But yeah, did a lot of updates. Yeah, we looked at SMCI. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll end it there. So once again, stocks by the numbers. Thanks for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. Of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement, right? That is how you help me, help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they're very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.